Welcome, Wargamers, to the quickly sundering lands of the mortal realms. This is Book 3 of the Dawnbringers campaign series and video 4 of its coverage. And for any of this to make sense, I have a playlist in the description down below. Go check that out and get yourselves caught up to the story because I'm going to jump right into it. To add just a few details to pick up on, there was a huge ogre Maw tribe Maw pit ritual going on. Those ogres then attacked the Ghyran crusade, who were rescued by an outflanking maneuver led by Balthanos, the new Sylvaneth character that we got. It was a super cool fight scene, but before they could celebrate the victory over the ogres, the cities of Sigmar forces were warned by Balthanos. There's something coming, right? The rhythmic pounding that was started by the Maw tribe ritual has only gotten louder after they left. Like, they started the ritual and then walked away, and you would think it would die out, but it just escalated. So something's coming. And what that is the topic of today's video. So we're going to follow what this ritual was about, what happens to the Twintailed crusade, and find out where their story ends at the end of the long hunt. Real quick before I get into that though, if you like this kind of content and you want to support the channel in any way, please consider using one of my affiliate links down below. I created a link tree that shows all the different stores I have affiliate accounts with, as well as their savings, generally speaking, if any. And so you can use these to save money and also support the channel. Every time you use these links, big or small, it goes directly to supporting me, my wife, our cats, the whole thing, and I really could not be more grateful to you. I also want to throw a shout out to Goonhammer if you are interested in the Long Hunt, or really any of the Dawnbringer series. Goonhammer is an online site that has a ton of tacticals, reviews, editorials about the game state, that kind of stuff, so you can get all caught up and learn how to play your army well as learn all about the new campaign supplements coming out on Goonhammer. Now, before we get into this next lore bit, we get another interesting sidebar. I talked about this last time. There was one sidebar that featured Kragnos coming into ghyran from Gur, and there's another one. In fact, this is probably best described as the Book of Sidebars. I will explain more detail later on, but in this one, it features Alarielle atop her throne on the Oak of Ages Past. This is the ritual site for the Rite of Life that happened that basically set Age of Sigmar, 3.0 in motion. And Alarielle's having a meeting with some very, very notable characters. There's Lord Croak of the Seraphon, who's hovering silently, and basically he doesn't speak so much as project ideas into people's brains, which means I assume he doesn't get invited to a lot of parties. But next to him is Krondis and Karazai. Now, these are the two new dragon heroes that we got with the most recent opening, addition to the Stormcast army. These are the named dragons, like the one kit you can build either way. And I'm just going to say I love the way these characters are written. There's some great dialogue from each of them that I feel like really does represent their tones quite well. But the short of it is this. They're seeing Kragnos bear down on Hammerhall Ghyra Crusade. He came out of his, rum gate looking for his home, couldn't find anything, is really mad and is going to pick a fight with the first thing he sees, which they know from sort of a removed perspective is bound to be that crusade. Alarielle, who is already stretched thin by her, war against Nurgle at this point. Remember, that whole War of the Rains, or Dueling of the Rains, I think is what it was called, from the first book. Nurgle is trying to shower the area with blight, and Alarielle in the background is constantly purifying it. So she's already maxed out. And she looks at Krondis and Karazai and says, you need to deal with this. Like, basically, get your stuff together. She demands that the brothers, basically deal with the sins of your past. I'm going to focus on Nurgle to keep the realm itself together, but you and Kragnos have a history that is your own. You need to deal with this, which I loved. I thought that was a fantastic scene. Croak, again, not saying much of anything, but he basically flashes a vision into everyone's head of where this trap needs to happen, and the Seraphon army that's prepared to strike in its aid. So there's kind of a plan, but only they know the details. Like, we're just told that they have kind of flashes and inklings and stuff. And the dragons leave. They're like, all right, we'll go take care of it, goddess. And they head out. And as it's just Alarielle and Croak, she kind of becomes, I guess, remorseful, and maybe not remorseful, but sad. And she starts to think about how Kurnoth isn't here to aid her like he did in the early part of the Age of Myth. Kurnoth is a character from the old world that was struck down in the Age of Chaos. It's very vague as to what happened to him, but obviously I'm thinking we're going to get that filled in a bit more. But she basically misses her partner. Croak at this point lifts a finger and projects her to seeing the battle with Balthanos. It gives her a little bit of clear insight into what's happening. And if you don't know this, as we mentioned before, Balthanos is a beacon of pure ghyran energy. So he stands out, and while no words were said, Alariel receives the message very clearly: Kurnoth is not lost to you. Which is a super fun little lore nugget. But it also sets up the context for why we're going to see these characters in the next section, because otherwise it is far too left field. I won't lie, I flipped ahead a little bit just to kind of see what forces and characters were covered. When they brought up Krondys and Karazai, I was like, who? What? How did they get here? The sidebar explains it. So with that out of the way, let's snap back to the ghyran crusade. Marshal Thorian barely has time to stand up from her fight with the Slaughtermaster. He body checked her pretty hard. But really before she can get her bearings, Kragnos is emerging from the woods behind them. The rear guard takes the brunt of Kragnos' assault. If you don't remember, I think it was the Shattered Realms Kragnos, or Broken Realms Kragnos book, they had a scene of him basically trying to assault the city of Excelsis, and he was just a stampede and made waves of earthquakes behind him. But that whole fight scene, they were behind a huge wall. This is just dudes walking in the woods. So when it says he tears up their rear guard, I'm thinking dudes slicing down people in the hundreds. And the stories kind of connect here because it becomes clear Kragnos exited the Realm Gate, couldn't find his old home or anyone there. So they came because they heard the initial ritual thumping that it was causing. But then as our heroes heard the thumping increase and get bigger after the battle with the Maw tribes, it turns out it wasn't the ritual. It was the shields of the Cruel Boys being slammed in rhythm with what the ritual was. So that's pretty cool. They basically let out a flare, and then a whole different destruction army caught the rhythm and moved right in. But to that end, the Orc army surges in too, along with Gobsprak. Balthanos is headed that way, but he's all the way at the front of the crusade, so he has to take some time to move back. And the description of Kragnos' charge is epic, right? Each step causes earthquakes, it's tearing up the bones of Behemoth himself. So there's osseous shrapnel in the air, it's very metal. And to break up this slaughter, Krondys descends from the sky. And what's interesting is the battle is pretty clear. The mortals on the ground mean nothing instantly. All the orcs and all the humans and all the Sylvaneth really kind of toned down the fighting because everyone's much more interested in watching a dragon fight a god of earthquakes. Which is fair enough. And honestly, the fight is a little bit of a disappointing one because it's not a fight. Basically, Krondys begins to kite Kragnos. When you shoot him just at the limit of your range and you kind of keep pulling him in a direction to chase you. And he's leading Kragnos to the edge of the battlefield. But Kragnos refuses to fall for it. If Krondys is not going to fight fair, neither will I. So instead of chasing after the dragon, Kragnos begins smashing Behemoth's bones, which starts to collapse on the Crusaders. Remember, these are megalithic ivory towers, so as they're falling, it's like a skyscraper falling in the middle of a block full of people. And this forces Krondys to engage, where he body slams Kragnos. It was a pretty cool scene. Because he basically just bounces off, which is exactly what you'd expect if you've ever played against Kragnos on the table. God of Destruction grabs the dragon by the neck, pins him to the ground, and while he is staring Krondys down, a series of detonations echo all around them. Because even though Kragnos wasn't pulled to where Krondys wanted to take him, he was out of the dead center of the battlefield, and all of those explosions were the cannons, the fusiliers, the everything with a gun, pointed from the Cities of Sigmar army directly at Kragnos. Because all of that gave Marshal Thorian a moment to set her lines, and basically gets to pelt Kragnos unobscured with cannon fire, which is really cool. And this fire doesn't just go on Kragnos, but on the orcs too, and it's enough to knock Kragnos down, and loosen his group on Krondys the dragon, who flies away. Kragnos at this point loses his cool, right? He was thinking smart before about not getting, led around by the nose, but he has just lost his mind, so he just runs. And he is led into a place called the Banyan Gulf, where an ambush awaits. The final scene we get for this, I thought was a very strange one. So, essentially, Krondys is flying towards this canyon. He's got Kragnos stampeding behind him. And in this this gulf, Karazai, the other brother of the dragons, and a full army of Seraphon and Dracolith stand ready. And as Krondys flies over, the two brothers have this cool like nod moment where they're just like, double dragon style, like, I got you, bro. And Kragnos appears. Karazai roars and charges, like again, an assembled force of everything remotely lizard-like descending on him, and the scene fades to black, which I kind of despised them for, to be honest with you. Telling me there's this awesome trap and then not delivering on what it does is kind of like showing a gun on the wall, but then like not doing anything with it. Like, yeah, I know it exists, but like, you haven't proven consequences. So I was like, and yeah, that's it. That is where the story of the ghyran crusade. They just got beat up by Kragnos a little bit. There's still an orc army at their footsteps, so like, that's a big issue. But this whole side quest out of left field of Kragnos coming in and then Alariel with these other big characters being like, deal with this, was pretty stinking cool. Now, speaking on that note of what's cool, let's talk about why is this cool. One thing I want to throw out here, this book, okay, unlike the other ones, I should say, it has an ending that is a lot like Lord of the Rings. If you know what I mean, like there's 15, that's being dramatic, but there's a lot of like sidebars that have resolutions and hints for the next book in the series that are not in and of themselves stories. It's like by the 5th ending of Lord of the Rings, you're like, if I see Elijah Wood more time, I'm going to slap him in the face. End the movie or don't. All 4 no play is not fun. Give me the credits. And this basically did the same thing. So what I'm going to do is another video coming out tomorrow that addresses all of those things. So going basically panel by panel, what are the hints, the teasers, the setups that we get in this book for the next one, as well as reviewing the thing as a whole. I will say, looking back on the Crusades at this point, this book, it really didn't do much for me. And by that I mean, I like the armies of renown that it came with. I actually liked the scene with Alariel, Croak, Kragnos, and Karazai. Oh my god, there's way too many K names in this story. This is the dumbest idea to put all these characters in one book. But the interesting thing here is that those were all characters that were foundational to AOS 3.0's start. It happened at the Oak of Ages Past with Alariel doing the Rite of Life. The 2 dragons came back as a direct result of Kragnos, who came back because of this Rite of Life freed him. The original cage he was in was by Lord Croak, and he's been instrumental in kind of containing Kragnos throughout this whole season. So while I don't feel like the book, The Long Hunt, really added much or pushed the story really meaningfully forward at all, I do feel like this was intended to be a nice bow on AOS 3.0, and I feel like the last story was a cool reminder of AOS 1.0. I don't know, there was good fight scenes. I really wish it hadn't have ended on such a bland note of like, trouble's coming. It's like, well, I can do that to my audience because I'll have another 15-minute video for you tomorrow. You can't do that to me, GW, because you're not going to have this book out for 2 months. I kid. I think the real core of these books has been that in this one, the theme has been like rearming. So the Akshi Crusade has Fire Slayers and Stormcast. The Black Talons are with them. There's there are actually now several Stormcast armies in the area between Ionis and Vandus kind of going their separate ways. And in ghyran, we were reinforced with a lot of Sylvaneth. And possibly something new. Kurnoth seems to be getting his own faction, and that makes me excited. If you have any knowledge about Kurnoth, because again, I always lean on people who played fantasy battles a lot when it comes to old world lore. There's just too much to have to find and source, and so much of it's out of print. If you could give me a little rundown on Kurnoth, I always try to pin the most helpful comments here to the top of the page, so if you could educate me and my fans, I would deeply appreciate that. It was always kind of vague as to where Kurnoth fit into things in AOS. It seems like he was like the royal consort and just love interest of Alariel throughout the Age of Myth. Her personal hunter, or man of the hunt, and so he would go out and, I guess, try and defend her from Nurgle when that first started, and then he fell to Nurgle himself, I think. It's been a long time, honestly. Anyway, friends, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I would love to hang out and chat with you tomorrow as we review all the different endings of The Long Hunt. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.